call the meeting to order on October 19th at 7:35.
Okay, and
Public
Do we
comment,
have-
public comment today. Bob, do you have anything to say or? No.
Oh, other than I was just looking at the numbers for Florida. I guess we're technically bankrupt if it wasn't for the federal government could print money. Everything that's going to come out of that for the funding for the cleanup is going to be the federal funds. So it's very interesting, the games they are playing.
And DeSantis will claim all the credit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was very interesting because basically Citizens is now bankrupt as such, but they obviously have the taxing authority to have the revenue come in, a revenue stream come in down, but the debts are so high, as the estimated uninsured debts are so high for the cleanup and the buildup afterwards. It's absolutely stunning when you look at the numbers in the billions of dollars.
We'll talk about that at number 6C.
Right.
All right, approval of the agenda. Let's see, do we have any additional things? We talked about a bunch of stuff beforehand.
I have an additional item with the recent Hurricane Ian. And I mean, I'm so out on the east side here. I don't know what it looks like across the rest of Orange County, but out on the east side, the major properties that are up for development, like Lake Pickett North, Lake Pickett South, I'm sure, Emily, you've seen, they're still flooded. So I know that this is, I see that there's still issues going on across Orange County with this. So I'd like to move to make a consideration of an addition to the agenda. And it doesn't have to be tonight, but just sometime in the future, just talking about either doing some type of a stormwater update to our comp plan.
it's on the agenda. It's
Okay,
number
got it.
letter C.
I see
C1.
stormwater pond. Okay, I strike that.
Yeah. Does this, okay, let me expand what she's thinking about. Shingle Creek, for example, when I drove through there.
Well, Eugene, just so we could stay on track, let's
Okay.
just keep going down, because
All
what
right.
she mentioned we are going to talk about.
Okay. All right, now we're gonna go to approval agenda. All approved, say yay.
Yay.
Yay. Okay. Kelly, I assume you're approving too,
Yay.
and Bob did too. All right. All approved, unanimous, I guess. Okay, report officers and work groups. Any new updates Lake Pickett, Kelly? It's in less than 1 minute, 2 minutes.
Yes, so Lake Pickett North is advertising on Facebook, Sustany. So to anybody who lives in the East Orlando area, then what they are doing is collecting, when you go to it, if you click that you want to follow them, they launch you to a petition that requires you to sign. And that petition signature of signing says that you support the development.
Oh.
So that's one thing that they're doing. Secondly is the sewer facility that LPS and LPN are being, if LPN were to be approved, but where LPS sewer is actually going, has no active permit to be functioning and has been cited on numerous spills into the Econ River, which is probably accounting for a lot of the E. coli. And Emily, I need to send that information to you.
Kelly, where's LPS located?
Lake Pickett South is located off of Colonial and like South Tanner. So
Okay, because we've been getting reports from in the Florida Trail that do not touch the water in the Econ because the E. coli is so high. So we're telling all hikers do not filter from the Econ at this point.
yeah, so it's sewage spills that are occurring with this the wastewater plant that's over off of, I think it's Underwood, Emily.
Okay, I'm gonna send you a link. If you could submit it through this form to my website, that way we could create a case for that and then look, make
Mm.
sure we follow through with it and look up whatever's going on and
Is it
Yeah.
EPD who does that work or who does that in the county?
I would look at, so what we would do is we would reach out to EPD and Public Works and utilities, just to find out who we need to go to. Maybe it's a couple of them. So yeah, so we'd have to reach out to a couple of different divisions and see who can research it and who can help.
So that's my update on Lake Picket developments.
Okay,
Okay.
um,
The
okay,
LPN work group. Do you have anything on the Grow Master Plan or anything like that? Nothing?
there are no updates.
Okay,
I'm trying to think though. I think they have a couple of more PSPs coming to us.
PSPs, which is that?
Preliminaries, subdivision plans,
Okay.
which goes into more detail of where everything's gonna go.
Okay, I did notice during the storm, there's a very large lake that's formed off of Old Tanner Road right on their property. So hopefully that's one of the wetlands.
There is
more
a
on the
big
north.
lake. It's not really huge, but it's a big lake.
Definitely a hard packed area that's flooding quite nicely. Okay, Austin's not here today, so we're going to skip that unless someone else has something on the corridor. And now we're on C for the Hurricane Commissioner request, stormwater pond codes.
All right, so the hurricane, Kelly, I just want to make sure, are you good for us to continue? Because I know you're typing notes. Yeah, okay. So two requests I had made back during Irma was updating the stormwater codes to meet 100-year storm events and also adding buffers along water bodies such as rivers and lakes so that we don't build anything within those buffers where it would allow the bodies of water to overflow and not flood people's houses. At that time, I told them that, hey, this is climate change. The hurricanes are just going to get bigger and hold more water and therefore release more water on us. They're not going to get smaller. I mean, we're not going to go backwards in climate change. I don't unfortunately see that happening, and definitely not anytime soon.
In our lifetimes,
And maybe not in our lifetime, maybe
I'll be dead way before.
not to be really dark, but the end of the world, we're probably on that track. But hopefully we have at least 100 years left of the planet and that's livable. But in these next 100 years, let's try and make it the best as possible and have those buffers in place and stormwater ponds that holds the water so that we're not all underwater when a storm comes. So that's what I asked back then. They said, they didn't really believe me that these kind of storms would continue. They were like, yeah, it's one time, it won't ever happen again. So they kind of blew it off. Now it happened again 5 years later. I think now they're going to take it a little bit more seriously. I'm hoping so. So I know we were going over stormwater pond codes, and this is definitely something that we should work in. And so the county is gathering locations that had flooded this time. They did not last time, which they told me they were. Then I found out a couple of months later that they didn't.
I didn't see anyone out. When I drove all around the southern portion of the county, I saw no one.
So
I
they're
did
going
not
off
see
of
it.
calls that they got, like rescue calls from 311 of people complain about their house is being flooded, calls on roads being closed and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I definitely asked if they were like maybe some satellite images that we could use. But we'll see what they come up with.
I'm working with Gabby and we're going to use 911 calls and other ways of trying to figure out where the flooding was, because I don't think Public Works, from an engineering standpoint, that was a great time to be out driving all around to see what the actual flooding area is, because Mother Nature provided us exactly where it was flooding. And I guess my concern about even with what you're saying is as you fill in the wetlands, like we're doing, I went down and photographed Meridian Park, where we have a lawsuit that is in the 5th district, but they've knocked out the whole Cypress Dome to put a new road through it. As they put in fill in that and build it up 5 to 8, whatever feet, all that water retention that was in that system has to go someplace. And what they're doing is they're pushing that water over to a retention pond. I'm not sure if it's a retention pond or a borrower pit. And that's something that is another question. A lot of the properties down there are building what we would call borrower pits because they're 50, 60, 70 feet deep. They're using the soil to build up the local area, which means that those retention ponds are now putting water directly in the superficial aquifer, which is a bad thing. But what they're doing is taking that water, filling it into cypress areas, and then from channelized canal and moving it through the system all around down towards Lake Mary Jane. But what currently is happening is outside the developed areas, once you get down towards Cosby Marsh, where Orange County owns a property, those areas are flooding massively because they're not designed to flow water through channels. They're natural still. And the water, basically, Mary Jane and Moss Park act as a dam to hold back the water until they flood over, and they were flooding into Mary Jane. So what happened to the residents down there in the Isle of Pines is when the storm first came in, the water started blowing in from Howland Ranch from the east. So that's how the homes got flooded initially during the storm. Water was rolling through their homes, engulfing their homes. Then as the water started flowing from the north, from all the development, because all the wetlands have been filled in and there's no capacity to contain that water, it's moving down and now it's flooding Mary Jane. Mary Jane rises and it floods from that direction. So you got a double whammy down there. So somehow we got to figure, the problem is the retention ponds are going to fill water because it's wet down there. So I don't know how you're going to fix the problem because we're allowing development in wetlands. I don't know how you contain the water because what we're doing essentially is we're taking, and this is kind of crude, we're taking analogy of a staple gun to your bladder, and we're stapling down your bladder and saying you're going to drink as much water as you were doing, and you got to hold it. Well, guess what? You can't because you don't have the, and so 1,000 milliliters, you're only carrying 10 milliliters. And that's what we're doing to the wetlands. We're saying that you have to carry all this capacity of water, but you can't hold it anymore. You're going to go down the system. So I don't know how you accomplish this problem. Ponds only work in places that they had no water. All the areas that we're developing today on the east side, the southeast corner, they're wet today. So just because you can put about 8 feet of fill doesn't mean now you have a bunch of water capacity to offset that. How do we do that from a banking standpoint? It's the economics of the system.
Well, what they've been doing is they've been putting these retention ponds where wetlands were. Because they say it's like the lowest area, so it makes more sense to put the retention pond there.
But the retention pond is not carrying, it's not carrying any more water. Yeah, I mean, that's.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just telling you like how they
If I
were
take
thinking.
Okay,
And so it would make, from what you're saying, though, it would make more sense to leave the wetlands and find, this is what I'm kind of understanding, leave the wetlands to do their job. And then in dry areas, that's where you add the extra
It's either that.
capacity.
Or you do what they done in South Florida, build STA storage units. And like they want to do in Taylor Creek. Basically, you build a big area and you pump the water. Somehow you create a hard pan and you create a giant lake. And that's where all the water, you create a new Lake Okeechobee in southeast Orange County, because you can't take 100, let's say you take 1,000 acres and develop 600 of the acres that used to be wetland soils. Now they might not be wet all the time, but if you look at the Meridian Park soil maps, 97% of it is classified as wet soils. And you cover that with 80% development, which means none of that is carrying any water. It's being siphoned off as fast as possible into some retention pond. you still have you still have a gallon of water sitting on it, on a foot. You got to do something with that water. And I don't know where you put it. It's an engineering problem. Now I'm an engineer and I can chastise him on that one. I don't know where you put the water.
Yeah.
Do you put a pipe out to the ocean and dump the water directly into the ocean? Because that's.
Now, what I'm thinking is if we work with the buffers that I was saying, that way you allow space for these water bodies to expand when needed.
But if you look at Meridian Park development, most of it's wetlands that they're developing in. So you can't build wetlands where there is none. There's no more space. The whole area.
Yeah. So the buffers is kind of like an idea of moving forward.
Yeah,
like,
say you're on the
to-
east, if you're out the District 1 and it's all dry, you might be able to create an Orlando wetlands type thing out there because it doesn't carry water at the surface. But in the east,
I'm sorry, Eugene, I have a maybe what's a request? Like, is it possible for you to make a request in the revision of downgrading type 1 wetlands to type 2? Because the developers can make a request to downgrade the classification of a wetland from a type 1 to a type 2 if it's not contiguous. Well, as development has occurred over the years, we've allowed for wetlands to be infilled, which then stops them from being contiguous to others. But if we were to stop that process of allowing the downgrade of class 1 to class 2 or put additional restraints around it, then we would have the ability for when one wetland gets flooded, it would flow into the next, it would flow into the, into the next one and into the next one. But the problem is that once they are downgraded to the type 2, unless the commissioner, like you do, you make the request for it to come before the BCC, unless that request is made, then staff gets to determine whether or not the type 2 it doesn't have to come before the BCC and it can just be filled in. So if we need to stop downgrading our class 1 wetlands because there's been negative impact to them because of poor planning decisions. And then moving forward, we have to make sure that they stay continuous to one another. Can we do that somehow?
I definitely believe we can. Yeah. I think that's an actually easy request of the county. It should
Emily?
be. Well, I say it should be easy.
Bob, go ahead,
Yeah,
Bob.
yeah, I started looking at the stormwater thing with my partner as such, and I'm going to listen tomorrow to one of the most quotable, I guess, experts in Florida, and I guess she started off with sea level rise down in Miami, and now she's into flooding as such caused by rain as opposed to just sea level rise giving their problems. But the bottom line to it was that I don't know if she put out the material or not, but the insurance companies are all going nuts because of the windblown water, rising water controversy back and forth that happened with all the other hurricanes is going to happen here, I guess. But the most important thing is that Florida supposedly has lost about 30% of its permeability as such. And that becomes very critical because when we develop as such, the water can't go anywhere, can't go straight down anymore. It has to go off horizontally. And that's what's, generating a lot of these issues that are these huge floodings of areas that hadn't had floods. But supposedly FEMA has run a bunch of drones as such, and I think OUC did it too, whether or not they're available to show the flooded areas, because they're going to have to, I guess, redo the maps and upgrade it. Of course, FEMA was under the Trump administration was just decimated. So a lot of those kinds of projects never, even got started, let alone have to get started from zero now and under a lot of pressure as such. So they're going to come out with substantially upgraded flood maps as such to set off the premiums to offset the premiums on the insurance. Plus, the insurance industry is talking about seriously, like they require now, fire casualty insurance as such. They're going to require flood insurance for a mortgage issue in Florida, which is going to be a real game changer as such. But again, the permeability factor loss can't be replaced because that's done by development, and it just doesn't go through concrete and wood and structures and so forth. And that's why you're getting a lot of the, the secondary flooding that Eugene is talking about as such. And that's what I was wondering, Emily, is there anybody in DEP and the county DEP that you can talk to that's got any kinds of studies on these kinds of things, or has even started any work in there? Because when I started to look online, I couldn't see anything at all other than, the quote unquote retention ponds, which are basically, like Eugene is saying, they're useless as such. They just can't build one big enough to do it. So I was hoping that somebody is starting that in DAP, maybe with clandestinely or, without authority or whatever. But if that would be a starting point to get some more information, definitive information, particularly like the pictures that Eugene is talking about from these drone flights that they conducted. And I guess they were incredibly extensive because that technology is so far advanced, even from the last hurricane that we had. If that makes any sense to everybody.
No, it definitely does. They did have a drone at the Hurricane Irma, and I thought that they had, because they told me they were going to do the east side, but they didn't. So we didn't have that data that they should have collected back then. But what I did get them to do was a study on flooding and like the swales and stuff like that, which was they said a 3-year study. It's been over 4 years now. I need to see where they are with that, but even that study probably is outdated already. So now they're saying that they're working on a GIS system to show where all the flooding happened, taking the data that I had kind of mentioned. But yeah, we have to just see where everything is, where all these flooding areas are, and then try to make sure that, that's very interesting what you said, that 30% loss of permeable space. That's something we really need to take into consideration with saving the wetlands, adding those buffers and water bodies. I guess like maybe another Orlando wetlands type of thing, to capture even more water, like Eugene said, I don't know if that was an actual suggestion or something he was just throwing out there, but there's definitely a lot to look at.
My analogy would be, you're building in a place and you're going to store water, and the place you're going to store it is the swim pool, which is already full. And you're going to put another 100% of water into that swim pool. Guess where it's going? It's going over the edge. And that's what's happening today. You can't fill the swim pool any higher. So I guess one of the things that we can make a request is make sure FEMA, I know Marge Holt, this has been something she's been on top of for 15 years, is the FEMA maps have been out of date for decades. They're way too low. They need to be higher. And we need to be on FEMA and say, look, you need to give us real maps, because we're building in places that they're going to get swamped. You can't do the problem. I tell people when they buy land, look at the maps, but the problem is we're filling in the land, so you don't know where you're moving to. You just see a wetland now and it's upland.
That is so true. It's like buying the Florida swamps, not knowing that they're Florida swamps and you can't tell.
Yeah, it's very interesting because up north, again, not to rub it in, but if a development is built up there, it's automatically that storm sewers and sanitary sewers, which of course are required, but they have to be built together. There is not any approval as such of, like, we're still approving septic tank systems and so on. And of course, when they flood, they're part of the causation of all the bacterial infections. But Florida just is absolutely refused at the level of development that, California, all these other metropolitan areas have had for years, where storm sewers are in effect part of the building codes as such. And evidently the developers, I guess you would understand this more than I would, Emily, but that it seems like that just as politically has never moved down in Florida. And that's exactly what's needed now, because that's the only thing. Eugene kept bringing up the question, but that's what I was reading in the study about permeability. That's what the reason that the storm sewer system is put in, because when they do the development, the permeability is gone. So they know they're going to have runoff, and that's where it comes into the storm sewers as such. So it's a combination of factors, in Florida. Is like I said, when I first moved down here and I asked the developer what the storm sewer was. He said it's the cul-de-sac along the road, which had basically overgrown and was useless. So it was, I went away and I laughed under my breath, and I said, as an engineer, I said, oh yeah, that's going to work real good. So here we are.
Yeah, wow.
Well,
All right, so I think, what would be really awesome is having maybe a memo from the District 5 Neighborhood Advisory Council with all of these kind of like requests of the county that I could submit, but it'd be really cool, because this was the purpose of the District 5 Neighborhood Advisory Council, right? To have these recommendations and requests that we could submit to the county. So, if we put these together and have it like from the Neighborhood Advisory Council on some requests supported by Commissioner Emily Bonilla, and I'm submitting it as an official request.
Emily, are you getting complaints from your other commissioner associates about neighborhoods that haven't flooded for years? I would assume people would be on the phone like crazy now, quote unquote, bitching to their commissioner about the flooding in their backyard as such. Have you heard anything anecdotally from your fellow commissioners about situations like that as such? Informal, obviously.
We had, in our last BC meeting, we talked about the hurricane, and commissioners were very upset because several of us had large apartment complexes and subdivisions where people had to be rescued and were now homeless. So it was definitely a concern of a lot of us on the board. And I was like so shocked to hear it, but happy to hear it that Mayor Demings actually said climate change. Although it was really weird because the public works guy who the mayor is asking questions to kept skirting around the word. And then me and Commissioner Wilson was like, you could say it. We didn't ban it in the county, climate change. So, but I did find that as a concern, where if our public works director doesn't believe in climate change, that's a concern to me, because then do we have someone who is able to really look at the science and help us get us to where we need to be?
I mean, it's almost, when I hear belief is something that you do with faith, it's understand. If you're a person of science, you have to understand what's going on. You don't believe something. You look at the data and understand, is it proven or not proven? Well, at this point, it's proven, hands down. So, it's about as tough as science can get without, we don't call things laws anymore.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I suggest people watch The Day After Tomorrow, that movie, if you haven't seen it yet, because it seems like whatever happened in that movie with the storms, it's happening with our hurricanes. Like you just gotta watch the movie. And
remember, well,
maybe we should have a District 5 Neighborhood Advisory Council field trip of movie night, and we can all watch it together.
Well, I mean, they call this a 500-year storm, but none of us really were. No, I don't know, but anyone in Donna in 1960, it flooded downtown for about 6 weeks, and that's why we have the drainage holes in all the lakes now. But it also flooded Lake Jessup all the way up to Florida Avenue. Ian did the same thing. It went up the Florida Avenue this time. This time, unlike 1960, there's a bunch of people living on the econ now, and they're seeing the flooding out there. And what I saw today kind of was very surprising on the Econ State Forest. The trails for the Florida Trail used to be just kind of like brown, dark black dirt, typical muck soil type. It's now white sand, about a foot deep. It looks like winter. I got pictures. I could share them on the thing if you want to see them. But it's totally surreal to see that thousands of tons of white sand has been transported all along the Econ Forest now. And it came from somewhere. I'm not sure where. It's upstream, wherever along in all those places. But this has happened, 60 years ago. So I'm not surprised that this is happening. It just, we're building in places where people did not live before. They lived in Christmas because there's a sand ridge right there on Christmas Road. They didn't live where the 419 is because it's wet. I mean, there was some logic on where people used to live. They didn't, they adapted to avoid the problems. We think we can build around the problems. And that's the difference between our generation and the previous generations. We think we can engineer nature and control it.
Hey, Eugene, you remind me of the French Quarter in New Orleans. That's the one place that didn't flood during Katrina because, it was built.
It was high. It was high. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why the old timers, the Native Americans in Florida did not live on barrier islands. They certainly fished out there. They stayed out there during the season to get food, but they did not live full time there because they knew what would happen during the hurricane season. They lived inland. Only we, the arrogant ones, think we can control nature.
There's
And-
actually one tribe that did stay in one location and actually built canals. You can watch that video. Emily tells all. Interviewed some people who studied that tribe. That's how I know about it.
Which tribe?
Ah,
Took them in?
I forget the name of the tribe.
Was
It
it one of the Florida tribes?
was a Florida tribe, but they went extinct.
Yeah, they all,
Supposedly, I think they were killed off because they were very stubborn and wouldn't be taken,
Well,
as
we had-
slaves, or they were just, they fought back and everything.
we had 7 tribes. There's still one tribe alive, but doesn't live in the state anymore. They live in Louisiana, Appalachia.
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of tribes that were taking on the Trail of Tears out of Florida and stuff. But not to get on
That's
a
another
side.
thing. Okay,
Yeah.
we're at 8.
But so can we get we'll work on Kelly, Eugene, and we could on the side work on that list and memo of requests. So we could probably meet at another time, maybe what's today, Wednesday. We'll organize like when will be the best time for us to talk together on that. Are we ready to move on to the next item?
I think
Well,
so.
Karen and Carolina isn't here. So we have the Vision 2050. So I definitely would like to get maybe a quick summary from each of you on what your thoughts are on that. And we did get an email from Luis on his comments. I know like probably people are working on that. I'm looking at possibly us not having a meeting in November and December for the holidays, but if you guys still want to do it, we could do all virtual ones in
How about
November
we
and
do-
December.
How about we just concentrate on the letter, the 3 of us, and do that? That would be enough for the holidays, because I'm very busy for the next 2 months doing field work. So I'm only in town 2-3 days a week. I'm out in the field camping in different parts of
Okay.
the state. So Wednesdays tend to be good because in between trips, I'm recovering
Mhm. All
physically.
right. All right, so just quick update in the Vision 2050. When I was last talking to staff, they seemed more lenient on making edits and changes, because they were kind of like fighting back with me. You know, he was like, well, I'm aggressively going to answer your questions. And I was like, that's fine, but you know, you're still not answering them. This last conversation and meeting with them was more like, you know, because I asked them, I'm like, so who in the public is saying that this is a great idea and they like it? Because they kept saying, oh, we did all these community meetings across the district, I mean, across the county, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, well, who was saying they wanted this? Kelly, they actually brought up your name. And
What?
yeah.
Kelly?
It was like, and
you
they
hiding
said
They said that I supported it.
that you had said something, or Save Orange County had said something about how they wanted to keep the rural aspects and blah, blah, blah. And so they took that as kind of support to their, well, as long as we do development there, but it keeps the characteristics, it's okay.
That is absolutely not what I said. And I actually submitted a letter post my focus group that says that those, they were referring to them as a specific type of development. I can't remember the name that they were using, but it was kind of like a cluster development where it's like you put, you know, I don't remember what the names of what it was referred to as. And I adamantly opposed, and those meetings are all on, they taped them.
Were those hamlets?
Yes, villages and hamlets. Yeah, there you go.
Yep, I adamantly opposed that. And I specifically said that the citizens were, they were sold out by the previous commission, who said that keeping rural character, building buildings that look as though they're farms, even though the density is urban and it's in the rural area, is a violation of the rural community's trust. That was like the wording that they used.
Okay, so I kind of pushed them on. So I said, so they actually said that they support this style of development in the rural area. And then he was like, well, no one really said that.
Mhm.
And then he started like, well, you know, if you want to do edits, we're open to edits and stuff like that and working through this. So then he started like getting more reasonable to work with me. And I think it was because I did not know about that letter, or that even the meetings were recorded.
Mhm.
Because now I understand why he started becoming more reasonable, because they can't say it was supported by the community when the community was totally against it. And
Yeah,
then try to push this forward in a BCC.
yep. And I was the only one in those focus groups that showed up from the rural service area. So I don't know how like there was nobody from Christmas, there was nobody from Bithlow in District 5 anyways. So I don't know how they would even say that they had support when there was nobody in attendance from that area, with the exception of one person.
Those people
So-
probably think they're protected because they're far enough out. They think they can outlive it.
I don't know, but
I don't think that the county advertised well enough to invite people to attend.
I
didn't
think
get an
that's what it
invitation.
is.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Heath.
Heath didn't get an invitation to nothing
Yeah,
about-
I think so. The community meeting last night, I brought up Vision 2050, and I was like, you know, this is kind of what they're looking to do in 2050, Vision 2050. And I just took a moment. I was like, do y'all know what that is? No one gave me any response. They just stared at me with this blank stare. And I was like, if you don't know, and I said, if you don't know what it is, it's okay. That just means I need to do a better job in getting the word out. So please raise your hand if you don't know what it is. Almost all of them raised their hand at that point. So I think they were like, they didn't want to be embarrassed to be like, I should know this, but I don't, you know? So I kind of encouraged them to let me know. So I have to do a better job. I
Yes.
do.
My
getting
comment
this out.
about this whole thing was back in the meetings is why are we reinventing the whole planning process? Because we already have policies and goals. What's not working and why are we throwing those away and coming up with a whole new set of ones instead of continuing to try to improve the ones we currently have? 2050 is only 28 years away. And if you look at this CFX plan horizon, they're at 2060 for their roads. So we're already 10 years behind on their plan horizon. So not that I plan to be around at that point, but you
Yeah.
might be.
I think it's a good idea to do the Vision 2050. I just don't like the way we're going about it. Like it really needs to represent what the people want. And right now it's representing what the consultant that they hired wants. The consultant that they hired came up with all these ideas, the villages and hamlets, and think it's a great idea to put in our county. And she's like from Virginia or something.
They have a book.
So
That consultant actually has a book that they're selling online, and it looks like it might read the same way as chapter 1 with all these visions.
oh wow.
I didn't
Keith,
read
you're-
it, but I read the cover of the book and the intro or whatever, and it looks like you basically got the book in that chapter.
Heath, you're exactly right. And there's verbatim writing from the book to this, which makes me feel as though this plan that has been forwarded is like anytime that this consultant is hired this is probably like a canned plan for all destinations and all cities across the United States that she's hired for. I mean, you have verbatim paragraphs right out of the book.
That's
Oh,
why.
what a great way to make easy money.
Well, that's why when you go to Lake Nona, you're not sure where in the hell you are in the United States. So it's like
Or-
everybody else.
Or Baldwin Park. I've
Or
actually
Baldwin
seen
Park, or-
that development in other areas. I'm like, hey, this looks like Baldwin Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, again, I go back to the basics of why are we reinventing a complete thing? We have problems with the current plans. For this consultant that came up with a new vision, they would have to fully understand the current plan and what are the deficiencies in that plan.
Well, there's two consultants. There's a local consultant and then there's the out-of-state consultant. They've hired two.
I'm just afraid that we're gonna lose things. That's what, every time I see a new plan come out, things get lost. Every time, when I was a web developer, every time I got a new president, I had to write a whole new web page. I always drop content. And that's what I'm afraid. We're gonna drop content of the current plan. It has problems, yes, but we have 30 years of
What's the
Either-
current plan called, Eugene? There's different plans, like there's a
Comprehensive
affordable
plan.
housing plan. There's not one, this is like a comprehensive plan.
Well, we have a comprehensive plan. They have a bunch of chapters. I mean,
But it doesn't really include everything. This one is, like one of the things in this vision, like that I asked for was the economic development, and I'm glad they heard me and they entered that. They've also added like arts and culture and sustainability and, so they're really trying to add in a lot of stuff.
historically, under chapter 263, before Rick Scott got rid of it, we were required to do a evaluation and assessment of our report every 8 years. So every 8 years, we did a year report. And that was our opportunity to actually review our comp plan and ask the questions that you were asking. What are we lacking? What are we doing? So what we're doing is we're trying to develop this massive new plan and basically get rid of the old plan when it really needs to be, it's shown its age and needs to be updated. And we're not doing that. We're just throwing the whole thing away, saying, hey, we now know much more and we're smarter than we were 30 years ago. I don't believe that. I believe we're going to drop a lot of stuff and we're not aware of it because we're not experts and we don't read that stuff in and out. And I don't think anyone in the
What's
county.
in
can
the
do
old
that.
plan that needs to be in this plan? Because I don't think this plan's gonna go away. I don't think they spent this much money on this for it to just go away.
It's a shame. I mean, I would like to see this plan be absorbed by the current one. And what are the shortcomings? Because it's have to do a matrix between of the two and make sure you're covering all your bases because
Well, the shortcoming is like out there when we were talking about that Rebol property, trying to acquire that. Under this plan, the way I read it, that property's protected. It doesn't matter what the owner wants to do with it. Because that's in the rural zone, the rural east zone, that should be protected.
Except
Under
it's
the
not,
old
because they're
plan-
still keeping the land use and policies from the old one on that property. which I think is
Well, see, that's
BS.
woven into
I
this.
think that's wrong. Like,
Yeah, I got that. So, yeah,
Well, the problem now is,
the old plan is bad.
the problem is if they have done any land use changes, then Burt Harris does come in effect. That's the danger of once you get future land use, the concrete sets very quickly.
the thing is, and this is something that we really have to think about, is that the Lake Pickett North does not have any entitlements or future land use. They only are part of the study area,
They have,
which doesn't mean anything without a future land use map.
and that's what we have. If they get the future land use, I'm backing out of trying to fight for it, because then now they have rights and it gets much more expensive. So the time is now, and that's something I was hoping Wes was going to update us with, is where are we at with real estate on that? And I haven't
It
heard.
looks like
back.
they're gonna develop Lake Pickett North, what I read in that. Did I misread that?
So the county did make an offer. They haven't received any responses back. I got an update from EPD on that. So they did make, offers, send a letter of,
Mhm.
is that what they call it? Letter of interest.
Did they send one to Sean Froelich and Mary Lamar?
To all the landowners, which would be both of them, because they own separate sections.
Right.
I sent 2 letters to Mary Lamar.
She's such an old hag. I know
This is being recorded.
I don't care. She is.
This is a public record, so. But. Well, I mean,
Kelly's like, let me just mute myself and I can say whatever I want.
I like it. I guess they don't have to say anything. If by saying nothing, they rejected it.
Well, they didn't say no, so maybe
Do we have
in
a
the
date?
back, they are considering it. Maybe they're not like completely throwing that idea out. So that's the
No.
good sign, I guess.
Do you know if real estate was in the ballpark of what they had paid for it?
So they didn't make like an actual amount offer because they have to first get a response back saying that they'll consider a purchase. And then they do appraisals. And I think they do 2 or 3 appraisals in order to get a good, the price that they feel is best for the county.
So,
Aw.
she's been under my feet. I don't know what she wants, but I suspect I know
Probably food.
that or going out, one of the two. Or she's very much cuddly. She doesn't like being left alone.
Okay, so the Vision 2050, Heath, so what were your comments and feedback on that?
I like it. I think it's pretty comprehensive. Just to keep this short, I don't see how they're gonna, to me, it's like a guiding regulation. It's not a law, the vision. It's something that's gonna be used to build out the county, the infill areas, which I know is popular, I think is popular with you, to infill existing construction. I just don't see how they're gonna enforce it. I still feel like, the short end of the stick is going to come up for the environment and for affordable housing. It doesn't, I think if they could assign ratios to how much new construction, how much we need a ratio for how much environment we're going to have left. If we're going to have X amount of new construction, how much affordable housing are we going to have left? Because it's kind of too nebulous for that.
Yeah, I like the idea. I did talk to Alberto, who's like leading this whole thing, about like, what about we plan for the number of units for how much population we're gonna get, which that kind of like falls into that, like how much do we really need in affordable housing? Yeah.
Do we want, I
We
guess
have
the question,
existing affordable housing laws, like Eugene says, we have existing laws, and somehow we don't have enough affordable housing. How did that happen?
Because we're waiting for the developers to build it.
well, somehow we gotta get more finesse, because affordable housing is a massive problem throughout the state, and the keys, no one can afford to live there anymore. So the workers used to come from Florida city, but they're not coming because they can get the same pay. So, and we're gonna have, as long as I guess we have Osceola County, which is a very poor county, maybe we'll still get workers from there, but now we have transportation issues from those places. So I don't know, somehow there has to be something in this plan that we gotta get density and give them additional density credits to be able to build affordable housing. Somehow we gotta create an incentive system for them to actually build affordable, because most of the jobs in this county are very low income jobs. Vast majority of people don't make enough money to live on in this county. You know,
All right. So, Heath, did you have any other comments on?
Well, just to
Division
tag
two?
on to what Eugene said, we need to, yeah, we need an incentive to have affordable housing. And the plan needs to spell out with a number, how much affordable housing in proportion to how much new housing, how much of the 700,000 residents that are going to be moving here, how much of them are going to get affordable housing? Because somebody's got to make your Starbucks, you know, and if they don't have a place to live.
I mean, right now we have 1.4 million people living approximately in this county, and probably 60% of them make less than $50,000 a year. I mean, which is, you can't afford to live in this county.
We got to force the law to spell out how much, if you're going to build this housing development with these luxury homes, we got to have X number of affordable housing. It doesn't matter how we pay for it. If we can't have it, then we can't have that other development either.
Yeah, I mean, somehow we got, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to somehow say, if you're gonna build 100 acres and you're gonna put 10% of them are gonna be $1 million homes, then you got to provide a certain percentage of the others to be affordable. I mean, and that's just the way it is. Sorry, if you don't like it, go someplace else. I mean, one of the problems I think in Orange County is we still think we're a dinky little county, and we got to beg for these people to come here. They're gonna
Right.
come. We just have to set the rules that are in favor of the people who live here, not for them.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, if they're gonna move here from whatever state and sell their $1 million homes and move here, they should have to pay in the form of tax for their transportation, not make us come and pay another 1 penny tax to pay for their transportation. Because we're all, if that transportation tax passes, we're all getting punished for the sins of what the developers did. And, you know, they just built their house, but they didn't do any infrastructure or transportation planning. So people coming here with all this money should pay for that, not us.
One of the poor designs that we have is we depend on arterial state roads to do and county roads to do all the massive linkages. We don't build linked neighborhoods anymore. Like in downtown, we have linked neighborhoods. That's the way they used to develop.
Well, 2050 calls for that. That's what's great about it. It does call for that.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably putting new
You can walk everywhere and go to business and do all that. It's going to be more pedestrian friendly.
But I mean, but you know, right now I'm watching all these cheap 4-story wooden frame apartments going up, which aren't gonna, you know, termites gonna have a great time with them. But we're building in the city right now, right near my house, a 4-story, a 5-story, when they should have built 9 to 12 stories on, you know, anything. It's opportunity loss. And that's what's upsetting to me.
And I bet those apartments aren't affordable housing either, Eugene. I bet they're $2,000 a month.
Well, they're going to be ticky-tack, typical wood frame, the California style
Well,
apartment.
yeah, they're going to be cheap construction, but they're still not going to be affordable housing.
They're probably going to be 1,500 to 2,000 a month.
That's not affordable housing.
I agree. I mean,
Single mother with 3 kids can't afford to live there.
if you go talk to people where I had to do my precinct in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, those people are hot swapping beds. That's what they do for the tourist industry, because they don't make enough money. So you got 2 or 3 families who are not related living in the same apartment. That's what's happening. I would guarantee
That's not
you.
healthy.
No,
No,
it's
it's
not.
not.
Environment for a child to grow up in.
I mean, if we did a study of this county, I bet we'd find that a lot of people are not related living in the same homes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way that a
Maybe we
person
need to
working
do
at
that.
Disney or
Maybe we need to
SeaWorld-
do that study to show that there's an emergency there with kids growing up.
Well,
I actually put a whole list together of studies and data to collect on a rental registration to look at, to be able to see what that would look like. And that was part of that, and the board said that they weren't interested in gathering that information.
Well, they're not interested in child abuse, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's just, it's an environment. I don't know if the child abuse would happen because I think these families are working together just to be able to survive. But I mean, these are working class people who are far
Yeah.
below the line, and a percentage of them are undocumented, so they're ripe for abuse by the
That's my point.
handler.
It's abuse.
Well, abused by employers. I mean, I've talked to Mexicans.
I think what Heath meant, like the conditions that they're living in isn't what they should be living in.
Well, it's not legal, but they're not gonna, they can't, it's illegal to live that way. I mean, Department of Housing, Health Services has a credibility. They have what is, how many square feet you're supposed to have per person. And I would put money, I put $1,000 on the table here that there's a good percentage of people violating that right now down off of Rio Grande and Americana, just because what Heath is saying is saying in the hood, it's $1,500 a month. I mean, it's just, you can't afford to live in this county. $15 an hour is $30,000 a year minus taxes if you actually work full time, which you don't. So we
All
got
right,
18,000.
I do want to move on to Bob to see, Bob, do you have any comments on the Vision 2050?
I thought it was basically a political document, and I'm much more interested. Kelly made a comment, I think, I can't even remember when it was, but she said we put all these plans together and then we spend all this time basically changing them. And I was thinking of, after I got through reading Vision 2050, I said, then I found out about the book that you were talking about by the woman that wrote it, and it is the first chapter. It's identical as such. But I was thinking that it's just, to me, it's just not realistic. And I don't know if that's my own personal thing about it. I just view it as a political vision, political speech, blow off kind of thing. And I doubt very much that it's going to be realistically possible to do a great deal of that in, because if nothing else, Ian has been a game changer. And I think it's going to be even more of a game changer, because I don't think we realize the costs that are going to come out of this. And if we get hit by another storm like that and it goes up the center of Florida, God help us, seriously. But I just don't see it as viable, I guess, when I was reading it. And for all the things that Eugene and has pointed out, and Heath has pointed out, that the thing about housing, what was interesting to me is when I read a preliminary report of some of the damage down in Lee County and so forth, a lot of that damage was to low income housing. And these people are now literally living in, centers as such, because there is no low income replacement housing available to them. There wasn't to begin with. The only fact that they had in housing was the fact that they had lived there for maybe 40, 50, 60 years as such. But the new housing that was being built in those areas none of it was low income housing. So there's no replacement to put them in. And that's sort of what Vision 2050 or whatever they want to call it just represents. It's just a political delusionary document that, it's a pipe dream as such. And I sort of am afraid of what Kelly pointed out about the feedback that they really got. I have a feeling that your support staff, Emily, has been captured by whoever, and I think that a lot of that is if they're supporting that Vision 2050, which you said that you had in your meeting, I think that's because the support staff you have is I think been captured by these people. And so a lot of those problems, those fundamental problems like low income housing, are just not resolved in that document. They're maybe not even resolved, and they're not certainly resolved in the comprehensive plan. And that's more reality to me than the Vision 2050 is.
Thank you. Doesn't seem positive at all. But I really thank you for your frank comments and honest comments, and I think you're right on. It's, I have to say it's quite disappointing, but I hope that through the process we can really get Vision 2050 to where it needs to be. Do you have any other comments, or is that it?
Emily, I had one. So generally, so this is like a vision, right? And Heath mentioned it. It's more, it's not really, it's a guiding principles. It's not really policy that you can reference in terms of defining what is appropriate development and what is not. And then, Bob mentioned it's kind of like this pie in the sky, like, yeah, this all sounds great if you adhere to it. But every single BCC meeting that you go to, the BCC is voting on undoing the actual comprehensive plan. And so for me, what this document was really lacking was, it's very lofty and very fluffy writing, but objectively speaking, it doesn't speak to the things that you guys are saying, like what is the number of the units for affordable housing that's needed? How many acres do we need to preserve of green space? It doesn't provide any measurable outcomes where you could determine if this plan was a success or if it was a failure. Because you could subjectively say, oh, yes, we're doing these intensities and densities at locations that make transit viable. That's one of the policies that they have. Well, how do you prove it? There's no, they state this very lofty kind of goal, but there's nothing that's measurable out of any of it. And so it just seems like, I guess when Bob says like this political document, it seems as though it's setting up future BCC, the commissioners and the future mayors, whoever they may be, to say that they're achieving this sustainable development practice because there's nothing that objectively measures whether or not they are successful. It just seems like fluffy, pretty writing that in an idealistic world, if it was perfect, would be great if it worked, but we know that that's not where we function. And so it just seems kind of like a manipulative document.
Okay, well, there are goals and objectives, and you're right, they should be, the goals are supposed to be measurable, so are the objectives.
The basic problem in this document, and it was the same problem with the previous one, is the urban service line. There is no urban service line map in this document. That's hard. It says in 19, this is the urban service as in 2021, and we shall not increase it ever. Now, if you did that, then you have to start living within bounds. But as long as you have a urban service line that's not defined, Kelly's going to be fighting until she dies, because they're going to keep on taking land out of the rural character. So how do you plan? How do you plan if you don't have a limit? Where's the incentive?
That's the other thing, is that they have a direct line in there that says that the vision references that the urban service area will be based on the supply of usable land needed to accommodate the county's population and employment forecasts by year 2050. But we can't use all of the usable land. We already know that. That's what Hurricane Ian just showed us. So at some point in time, you have to talk about what is Orange County's carrying capacity. Like, at what point do you say we're built out? We can't build another residence because we are flooding. What is the carrying capacity where you actually say, like a Los Angeles or Atlanta, or, how at some point a county has to say we're built out. And Orange County doesn't seem to believe that. They think that they can just fill in wetlands and continue to build,
They're
build,
gonna
build,
build
build.
until they have no more usable land. They're building in Lake Nona should never been built in because it's a wetland. The whole freaking place is wet.
Mhm.
Avalon's the same way. I mean, 1980, I drove my Duster through Huckleberry and the water came up to my doors before they developed it. And that was 1980.
Oh, yeah, they're gonna pay from Tampa to Orlando. It's
So until you,
metropolis.
until you set in stone, and this is what Portland, Oregon did, is when you draw a circle and that circle is not the change, then you create an economic model where densification can happen. But as long as you can go out to Kelly's place and buy 50 acres from a farmer, then why should you go and densify and build, instead of this 5-story apartment being built by me, it should have been 12 stories because there's no more usable land to build out. That's why New York City went from a rural character in the late 19th century to what it is today, because it had physical boundaries. And we refuse to set, so they are artificial boundaries. Now, the urban service line is a community decision on what we are going to develop and what we're not going to develop. And that's what if you don't have that in this plan, I'm not spending any time reading it because it means nothing. Because the current plan does the same thing. It does not set numbers. In the 1985 law, chapter 263, you are supposed to you could do your updates with the year, and that's when you requested more land to be included into your urban service area. And for the longest time, I tried to make the econ to be the urban service line on the east side, and it kind of is, but there's no legality behind it. It's basically politicians saying, "Yay, we'll be okay with this." But now we have Grow, we have Sustainia. It's blown away. The next one is the St. John's.
You're right.
I mean, until we set a line, and
It
then
won't
if you
happen.
don't do that, why even bother?
It's not gonna happen.
No, it won't happen. But that's something that we should say. You have to set a hard line, and you say, we're not going to change this for 20 years. Because in my world, when I was working, I would see the contractors come in and say, we're meeting the schedule. Well, we're slipping. We're going to slip it to the right, but we're going to change the end date. So we're meeting the schedule again. Oh, we're slipping it. We're going to we're slipping the date again by 6 months. Oh, we're meeting the schedule. I mean, I watch this stuff happen on multi-billion-dollar projects. So it happens everywhere. So unless you're going to set a line, this is all for naught, because the future people sitting in Emily's position would just make exceptions. And we've seen where exceptions do. I mean, now we have flooding. The thing that will limit us, my prediction, is next year when they double our home insurance. A lot of us are going to say, screw it, I'm done with Florida. I mean, I don't know if I can afford $4,000 or $5,000 a year for home insurance, or I just drop my insurance because my home will be paid off in 2 years, and then I play roulette.
That's what I did.
I was
Yeah.
actually thinking of doing that sometime in the future too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we are being forced, but then we're, if we lose the house, we probably are going to be homeless because we won't be able to afford to build it again.
Well, if you insure yourself, you have a bank account where you save that money aside, that if you need to rebuild, you have it saved,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Then you're self-insuring,
yeah, you take the $3,000 or $4,000 a year and you put it in someplace. I mean, that's, I mean, or in my case, it's just a burn down rate. I don't burn that money every year by paying the insurance, and it's in my IRA.
So maybe the insurance companies will be our salvation. We'll see.
It might be, actually. I think you're right. I think that's where it's going to be, is this session coming up. If this legislature doesn't deal with it,
Yeah.
the state's in trouble, because
Banks ain't gonna lend on houses that aren't insured, and that just ain't gonna happen. And developers can't afford to build anything without banks giving them money.
and that's something that we need to maybe as environmentalists address up in New York when they go to buy the bonds or they get the loans from the banks. We need to say, look, this is a wetland that building, and do you really want, and show pictures of what Ian did.
Oh, they know it's a wetland. That's in the appraisal report. When they review the appraisal, it's in there what it is.
Yeah, the thing is that developers, though, they don't get their investment dollars the same way everybody else does. They have, I think it's called like hard money lenders, the soft money, I can't remember what they're called, but they're other investors who have the money, who then give the money to investors who don't have the money, so that they can make the money back for them with interest.
So the primary investor.
There's soft money, Emily.
Soft, there you go,
Yeah,
thank
it's
you,
soft money.
soft money.
I mean,
Thank
I
you,
don't
Bob.
know. I mean, I think that's, between the insurance and if they physically, I don't think they would ever approve a hard urban service line because the developers would fight tooth and nail.
Hey, Eugene, this just creates an opportunity for these private equity firms to buy more rental homes because they don't insure those, they self-insure those. So you can have more people renting. You'll still have the homes, and more people are going to be renting. Watch.
Yeah. I mean, we in redevelopment areas, we should talk about higher densities. I mean, in my area, if you come with the right price, I'll sell my house to be developed as a 12-story or 20-story building. I don't care. I mean, I'd rather.
As long as you get the penthouse on top, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't mind as long as there's a place to live. And as an environmentalist, I want to see density. I mean, it's easier. I mean, from me visiting New York City when my family's up there, it's easier to get out of New York City than it is Orlando. It's faster by far. I can be in the country in less than a half hour from downtown New York City. You can't do that in Orlando.
All right, so I'm gonna stop this conversation. So we have, thank you, Kelly, for taking all the notes.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelly.
I think over the next couple of months, let's keep going through this Vision 2050, gathering notes. If we can meet again, just to kind of talk about like a work session, a work group session, rather than an actual council meeting, we could do some of those.
We need
So
to,
November,
we need to get together on the three of us about the other issue too, about the
memo. Yeah.
memo.
So that's how we'll move forward for now. For all the other smaller projects, I hope the groups are also working on that. That way, hopefully in January, we have more things complete and ready to move forward on with the board and, submit some proposals or whatever the other solutions might be, working with other organizations, nonprofits, whatever it may be.
Okay.
But looking for January, like starting off that year strong with some actionable things that we can do. And hey, maybe I'll invite you all to my house. We'll have a movie night with the day after tomorrow. It's the weather's getting nicer too. Maybe if the mosquitoes aren't too bad, we could probably do an outdoor big screen movie thing.
Well, they sprayed last night downtown. Did they spray your area?
They said they were going to.
Hey, Emily, let's do it on Park Avenue. They have that amphitheater out there and they show movies, so we could have the whole community there. And then you could get up and talk before the movie starts.
Your district too.
Future.
Well, I'll have to talk to the Winter Park Commissioner, see if we can get that done.
Hey, Emily, you could do Chinatown as a double feature. That's the story about the water problem in Los Angeles. That's probably true. It's how it happened, how it really happened. So that may be Orange County, Orlando very shortly.
Okay, I haven't seen that. I've heard of that, so I have to look that up. Okay.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie as such. It's a fiction movie, but supposedly the guy that wrote it had a lot of inside information about how the water situation and so forth developed in Los Angeles. So it's pretty close to reality, but the sub story is underneath is really the good one. But the top story about all the violence and romance and all that stuff
Title,
is
Bob, again? Title?
Chinatown.
Okay, movie. Okay. If I type in Chinatown, I'm not gonna get it.
Yeah, I think it's what's his
Oh.
name? The guy that was in
Is it
everything.
Or is it
I
old?
think I know what movie you're talking about now. I think it's a very in film school that was like one of the best movies that they, like a classic they recommended.
Yeah, it's a
With,
noir movie, I guess. It has that classification if you're into that kind of technology, into that kind of terminology. Film noir, is that what they call it?
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to remember the name of the main actor. He was the Joker in the
Yeah,
Batman
Heath
movies with
Ledger?
Michael Keaton. What?
Oh, no, Jack Nicholson.
Jack
Jack
Nicholson, you got
Nicholson.
it.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the female lead was the woman, I think she just died here not too long ago.
This was a Roman Polanski movie?
Good question. I don't know who directed it.
Roman Pulaski. I'm looking up Google. I found it.
You got it.
Made in 1974.
Yeah, great,
So I
great.
will work on that. I think movie nights are that would be so much fun and educational too. You know, I mean, these are fictional movies, but you know, they're
Oh.
fun and they cover some serious topics and have some, you know, factual element to it.
Then we could do Citizen Kane. That's the mother of them all, I think, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, I definitely heard of that. You know, I was in film school and you know those were brought up and I just never had the opportunity to watch them. So this would be an opportunity and reason to watch them.
Yeah, it's part of your formal education as you grow older.
That's actually Faye Dunaway is still alive and
Oh, is she still alive?
81
good for
years
her.
old. She lives in Bascom, Florida, which is like 2 miles from Alabama border.
Wow. How old is she,
Panhandle.
Eugene?
81.
Wow. It's cranking.
I mean, there's Jack Nicholson and who else? John Huston.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I thought Houston directed it, but I'm not sure. You said Polanski was in?
yeah,
Yes.
he was a producer. No, director was Roman Polanski.
Houston was in it then. He played a character in
As
it.
a character,
Yeah.
and Jack Nicholson, but only made $29 million at the box office. But that was, God, talk about living in nowhere. She lives like that's north of Mariana. That's
She probably owns the whole city
there's no city there.
or the country or the
Yeah.
land, I should say.
It's really close. It's right by Two Egg, if you know what Two Egg is.
Okay. All right.
All right,
So
anyway.
it's on almost 2 hours, and I said I was going to hopefully end at 8, and we're almost at 9.
Well,
I might have to do the candy apples tomorrow.
yeah, I think so. No.
All right.
Okay.
So yeah, so we'll communicate through email and stuff to try to get some dates for work groups. I am looking for an event planner to hire who could help me out with the movie nights. We're down to like 3 that I just need to now interview. Because I'm not hiring another aide. Instead, I'm just gonna kind of divvy up the position into like maybe contractors, like an event planner or something.
Okay. Is Wes gone in the middle of the politics season? Or-
Wes is working for District 3 now.
Okay,
So he just hopped over to the next office.
okay,
Yeah, I just didn't have enough work for a full-time position and he needed full-time. So
okay.
I am looking for a unpaid intern who could just kind of attend meetings, take notes and stuff like that. So that he or she might be able to help out with the D5 NAC as well. So we're collecting applications for that right now.
Mhm.
Um,
All right.
yeah.
I guess
So
you can call for adjournment if you
Yeah.
want. So, all right, is there any motion to adjourn?
Sure, motion to adjourn.
Okay, I'll second that. And
Aye.
everyone's unanimous on that?
Aye.
Okay. And just send out the next notice, Wednesday, the third Wednesday, but not for November and December, so maybe January.
yes.
Okay,
And
okay,
we'll start looking for locations because we haven't booked any locations for next year yet. So we'll start looking at.
okay.
If you guys have any ideas for locations, just send them our way
Well,
by email.
It should be dry by then, so we'll be able to go to some of the parks.
Oh,
We'll be
the
unflooded.
boat docks are opening up in the county parks tomorrow or this weekend. Friday or
I
Saturday.
raised
sometime.
a lot of concerns during the part, we're adjourned so people can leave, but I raised a lot of concern about that because no one did any water testing prior to them actually opening the water. So we don't know if the water's contaminated or